every therapist to know about Dupuytren's and about fractures and tendons and everything like that. Again, is it really feasible in a 4-year course? How a hand problem or a hand condition actually affects hand function, because after all, that's the essence of occupational therapy, is the function. And then the psychosocial effects, we've heard a lot about that this morning as well, of a hand injury and what the impact is of that. But those are knowledge things that you need to know. In terms of skills, a therapist need to know how to use. And therapy kit, it's a very practical thing to use and to do. That's what we'd like. And then a willingness to learn. Make sure that when these students come out of that area, out of training, and they now start their first jobs, that there is some way that we can support and educate and help them. So, what support is necessary? I think everybody's first job is totally overwhelming. Where do we go to? What do we do? And I think if you have got, as a therapist, the ability to assess the situation, to be able to say, this is what I've got, this is what I'm going to be working with. Because you need to be able to distinguish between what is important, what is really important to do, but is it also going to be practical to do it? It's no good having this wonderful idea, we're going to do all these things, and then it's really, really not practical, because our priorities are not completely right. We also need to know how to cope with things like limited resources and the distances and all those things. And I think that is where there's a very, very big role to play for a mentor. So who can be the mentors? I think an experienced hand therapist can be a very good mentor, because we don't need to do everything for a therapist. We just need to be very often a soundboard and say, this is my problem, what do I do? And then get that person to talk. We've all had those therapy skills. Get that person to talk and say, all right, tell me what you've got. How are we going to do it? What is your most important thing to do? And that's the way you can then guide somebody. You don't need to do it for them, but that's not the best way to learn. The best way is to learn by yourself. It can be on site. If the distances are not too great, it could be possible. But then there's also distance work, and you can do that through Zoom, and you can do it through WhatsApp and everything, and which definitely makes a difference. Just that we also heard that you need, I think it was the Australian people that said they really wanted somebody that they could contact sort of in real time. And some of us, like me, I'm not retired, but I don't have such a busy schedule anymore, and somebody like that could help. At a time when you say, I've got this patient now, what can I do for him, because this and this is the problem. I think that it is very nice if a mentee is able to travel and can just come and sit in your practice, come and shadow for a little bit, just come and see what are the possibilities. And I think those are very practical things. And obviously I work in a private practice, so for me it's very easy to get, anybody can come in, I just need permission from my patients. But if you are working in a clinical situation, in a hospital or something, it might be a little bit more difficult to organize, but I'm sure it can't be that difficult. The mentee-mentor relationship is something that one can work on. I think, first of all, the mentee must have the self-confidence to be able to ask questions and say, I don't know what to do now. But then on the other hand, I think the mentor, needs to be very good at clinical reasoning and be able to actually guide the therapist in saying, all right, let's reason out this problem that you've got. Then we can make you help. And then we can see how that can help you in your next situation where you're going to deal with. So what other support is necessary? One of the things that I think can make a difference, and that's something that is especially in the ComServe year, is that there must be like an up-to-date manual. If somebody can just say to you, if you've got this problem, phone so-and-so, he can help you. Or if you've got that problem, well, this is the clinic you need to go with, and when you go, here's a location pin to get to that clinic. Those type of things will really help if you're a first-time O2 who's just arrived and there's nobody to hand over, because I think that happens. The ComServe therapists, I never did ComServe because I'm a little bit too old for that, but there is definitely a place for this sort of carry over of information. Basic therapy supplies, we've got the nice kit there, we can definitely look at that. We really need to make use of low-tech type of things. I am very passionate about doing that. So I always say we can use low-tech therapy, but we can get high-tech results for that. And I think that's important that you see. We also need to be able to assure that the patient, a therapist can adapt and change. Technically, there might be some support necessary there. And then online educational courses are obviously very handy, but be discerning. Be careful about going online and doing some very highfalutin Canadian course and nothing helps you in what you really have to cope with. It's actually a bit better to do South African-based courses because I think we all have a better understanding about the actual situation we're in. And I think here SASH can play a big role. SASH can also be a very good source of getting mentors available and asking them to be available. And I think there's a definite role that we can do through the South African Society of Hand Therapists. And just a simple thing, as I said earlier this morning, about maybe donating some of your excess training equipment and things like that, treatment equipment, that we can do more of these type of things. So these are just a couple of shows of very basic tools that you could use and how you can actually just build up a whole library full of these as you go along. Most of the things that I've got, I actually just got from travels. Whenever I've been in some place, somewhere in China, I found lots of really, really good clothes pegs, and I've been using them all along. And so I think I'm the only person that comes home with clothes pegs in their baggage, but I do. And then treatment protocols. Oh, we used to say, you must have a treatment regimen. And then, or a regime. Then we were told, no, a regime is definitely not the right word to use. Then everybody talked about a regimen, and then it's changed, and now we're in protocols. But be careful of those. We don't follow those anymore. It's much, much more important to follow your actual sound clinical reasoning, and then you can get on to what is really important. Nicola said earlier on that she had a patient with an extensor tendon injury, but by the time he came to her, he actually had a stiff hand. Then you don't worry about extensor tendons, you worry about how to get rid of the stiffness, how to mobilize. Don't follow them indiscriminately. That is not helpful. Because also every patient's roles are different and the circumstances they come from are different. Our resources are different. So use them as a guide, that's okay, but really with an open and a clear mind. Development opportunities are always more difficult if therapists work really far in the deep rural areas, but we can offer through SASH some basic and intermediate workshops. I'm always a bit careful to talk about a basic course because I think therapists think, I've done my training, I've done my basics, now I want to do intermediate or advanced. And sometimes you have to say, but this is basic, or no, this is intermediate, but it doesn't really matter. But SASH definitely can apply quite a lot of those and present those. It is a little bit of a problem, the distance, the time to travel, but there may be more opportunities in the workplace. And I think the sharing of ideas, which we are doing here today, is really, really important. So although I've just talked about the mentor-mentee relationship, also the relationship among peers is important for a newly qualified therapist. So we can definitely still address the core competencies by means of workshops and courses. So those knowledge core competencies, I think, are very easy or easier to actually do through short courses, which we can definitely present. Skills, we can do definite skills courses because they're also very helpful. I don't think we can actually teach clinical reasoning in one session, but it's a possibility to work on. And I think there are things like, for instance, case histories. And that you can do online. You can actually say, I've got this type of patient, I can give a whole paper case and then say, all right, go and read it, think about what you'll do, and then come back and we can have discussions on that. I think clinical reasoning is, to me, is like the core of everything that we really need to enhance and nurture. Communication, we've also talked about, and that it can be a challenge. Attitudes, as I said, I don't think we can actually teach that, but I do think the most important ones from a therapist side is we want a therapist to be willing to learn, and we want to say it's okay to make a mistake, but just fix it. If you've made a mistake, don't make it again, because if you realize it, then you can work on it. Audrey actually told me that the same thing. We just talked about it, and she didn't know I had this in my slide. But it is okay to make a mistake. Or to say, I don't know, but I'll read up and come back tomorrow or next week when you come, I can fix it and I'll help you. I think if you have got a genuine interest in the patient's well-being and progress, then you can actually really get away with a lot of things. And just use good old common sense. All right, so where to from here? I think we can recruit mentors through the SASH. I think definitely there would be some people willing to help and to do these things. But they need a bit of training, so we can work on that. Cautious use of technology. I don't think we can do everything on technology, but there are definite things that we can do. And I think that all the support and training that we can apply after a therapist has qualified is very dependent on what we get when the therapist is actually comes out of the course. Because if the right attitudes are nurtured during the 4-year course, we can take on from there. And I think that's the way we need to go. Thanks once again for my invitation to be here, and I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks so much for Corianne. Kirsty, I think she summarized everything that we need for tomorrow. So do we still need tomorrow? So thank you so much. So, right, I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm just going to move on to the next one, which is the hand therapist journey online presentation. Marty Simpson from KwaZulu-Natal.
Good day, my name is Marty Simpson, and today I'm doing a presentation on a hand therapist journey. This presentation reflects on my own journey in becoming a hand therapist in a South African context, and the aim of this reflection is to identify variables that act as catalysts along this journey or as brakes. While combing through this 14-year-old journey, I asked myself several questions, and the aim of these questions were to facilitate reflection, to identify the variables that threw some petrol on the fire to make progress in my career, but then also that put on the brakes. The questions that I asked myself was, what sparked interest? What facilitated progress? What slowed down the journey? And when did you plateau? Let me give you an overview of my career. So in 2009, I started out as a ComServe in a tertiary hospital, predominantly doing physical rehabilitation, much to my great disappointment, purely because I had my eyes set on mental health. In this context, I saw quite a bit of hand therapy patients with little supervision, and it made me dash off into the office at any given moment, reviewing protocols. I think you guys all know the drill. It was an amazing opportunity to work in this setup, but I was really overwhelmed. In 2010, I started working at a secondary hospital where we saw vast amount of hand therapy patients. It is during this time that the bug bits, and the rest of my career has been an ode to the love and passion for treating patients' hands. I was really blessed with working with an amazing hand surgeon and then also working with a very passionate rehabilitation team. The experience was, however, overwhelming. Patient care was a production line where I got lots of exposure to various conditions, but very little accountability was built into day-to-day practice due to the sheer numbers that we were seeing. There was no guarantee that the next time a patient comes in, you'll be the therapist treating that patient. In 2012, our Hannah was born. We were a young married couple with very little financial resources. Life was bliss. I was locked, however, in a scenario where work was a production line and personal life had no room for making time to advance my knowledge in the field of hand therapy. In 2013, the opportunity to do my master's in upper limb rehabilitation at UKZN came up. An amazing opportunity that suited my time and financial restraints that I had at that point in my life. This was a coursework master's with a diploma aspect covering theory on conditions, assessments, treatment modalities. It was a holistic experience on my doorstep, which was amazing. We had well sought out lecturers from across the country, offering accessible mentorship, even though it was for a very short period of time. It gave me a very strong scientific base to build my career on, and it really had diverse opinions on clinical reasoning, which was refreshing. In 2015, a late night email, I don't know how many of you guys have done this, but helped me to secure the Mary Cash scholarship, which really helped me to successfully complete my CHT, my Certified Hand Therapy accreditation through the HTCC. More knowledge. I couldn't get enough at this stage. My whole career has been based on snippets of information that I've been desperately trying to put together to make sense of. And the CHT opportunity really helped me to put everything together. It really helped me to validate what I was doing in the practice and put my knowledge into context and into a bigger holistic picture, and adding some of the missing puzzle pieces that I so desperately needed. What was so amazing about this part of my career is that I could really, as I gathered information, I could integrate it into day-to-day practice. In this stage of my career, working in government, I really came across a lot of desperate, inexperienced therapists hungry for more information. And it's at this stage that I started a 5-day theory workshop, trying to introduce inexperienced therapists to the basic concepts of hand therapy. I really underestimated the need out there, and inexperienced and junior therapists are hungry for information, and this hunger really sprouts from being overwhelmed. It is during this stage that I also started a mentorship initiative where I flew with the Red Cross to various outlying hospitals and hosted simple hand clinics with the therapist where they booked their more complicated cases 4 days that I would be there. In 2017, I started working in private practice, and it was also during this year that our boy Daniel was born. He was born with some health complications that really threw a few curveballs into day-to-day life. It is really during this phase that I started feeling cut off from the broader therapeutic community. Financially and time-wise, I really just couldn't afford to attend any courses. And I really, during this phase, tried to focus on integrating the knowledge that I've gained to this point. So even though this was a quiet time of my career, it was really during this time that I started valuing the art of outcome-driven hand therapy. In 2018, I started training junior therapists again. Then taking us to 2019, I started my own hand therapy practice, which is really just a one-man band. And I really went into a bit of a 2-year slump trying to figure out the admin processes around this whole thing. Admin is something that eats creativity, but it's also something that's needed to keep the machine running that creates the magic. What was also special of this time, it really got me into connecting to multidisciplinary teamwork again. Really being part of a team where different team members can keep each other accountable, where there's mutual trust, where there's mutual understanding of each other's roles, and the value this gives to the outcomes we get with patients. During 2020, I started launching the theory, 5-day theory workshop onto an online platform, and how I underestimated this, because it was amazing how this course started reaching therapists in inaccessible areas. I had therapists attending from Ethiopia, India, UK, Springbok, rural Eastern Cape, therapists that would have never previously attended the 5-day theory course in person started attending this course and participating in this course. It is then during 2021 that I also started an in-person practical course for people to attend after completing the theory course. So if we're looking at the questions that I asked myself, the question on variables that sparked interest. So definitely quality and quantity contact with hand therapy patients. It is this type of contact that both overwhelms you but also sparks interest to seek further knowledge. Need for mentorship relationships, being asked to help to mentor people, and then being willing and accessible to offer these mentorship relationships is amazing. It is amazing what happens if you start taking accountability for the development of the therapist in your immediate circle of impact. And also attending stimulating advanced courses that opens up your mind to techniques and thought, like clinical reasoning out there, that just functions outside the box. Asking the question, what facilitated progress? It is key to consider the whole thing about being evidence-based in your day-to-day practice, being accountable for the patient that you treat and the outcomes that you achieve. Having measurements to monitor this progress is key with driving you to become a better therapist. If we look at other things that facilitated progress, is really having access to advanced qualification. Qualifications where you get tested on your knowledge. Having access to bulk information. Once again overwhelming, but it facilitates change, it facilitates progress. Going through the process of sitting down, studying, being tested, integrating the information, absolutely key. And then also definitely the training of other therapists really facilitates progress. In the beginning stages of training therapists, it's really overwhelming and humbling. But being able to put yourself on a platform where your own knowledge gets placed on exhibit and gets tested by other therapists is really key in making sure that the information that you put out there is valid and it can stand the test of time. The other two things that governs change is definitely also being actively participating in a multidisciplinary team, promoting your role that you have to play, and understanding and respecting your fellow team members. Being an accountable person in a multidisciplinary team drives you to progress in your skills. What slowed down the progress? Definitely lack and limited access to mentors, lack of free time to actually improving your knowledge, lack of soft skills to run a practice, a production line mentality when it comes to patients, times of being jack of all trades, and then definitely lack of finances is a huge break when it comes to progress. I've noted that every 2 years I started going into a 2-year itch. It is usually during those times that new knowledge has been integrated and that I'm starting to twiddling my thumbs. It is during these times that I started plateauing, but usually exposing myself to the variables that spark interest usually gets the ball rolling again to progress further in my career. What is my recommendations then? When we look at therapists, we need to see them as individuals busy partaking in a journey. And you never know when someone has their 2-year itch. These individuals are individuals that's newlyweds. They are new mothers. They are going through financial crises. They are going through times where they're overwhelmed, where they don't have any free time. We need to offer them development. We need to offer them exposure in accessible pit stops along this journey that is designed according to the phases that they find themselves in. Key variables that I feel can assist these therapists is to create hand therapy hubs in OT practices and departments. I find that inexperienced therapists and junior therapists in early years, and when I did my ComServe, the natural choice was to stay on in government and get further experience. This is not an option available to therapists anymore, and private practice needs to step up to create these hubs to junior therapists so that they can get the exposure that they need early on in their careers. Junior therapists need to be exposed to practices where there's evidence-based practice. With other words, quality and quantity of exposure to hand therapy patients. We need to develop a culture of mentorship in our profession where we really see each other as beggars, showing another beggar where to find the bread. That is where we all started. This needs to be community and not a hierarchy of gatekeepers that makes therapists and junior therapists feel inadequate of their intentions and their efforts. I feel very strongly in making courses accessible to therapists on financial platforms, time platforms. My own career almost came to a standstill during times of motherhood and financial burdens. Another aspect is we need to improve the soft skills and the ethics of hand therapists in running private practices and running departments. We are not training our therapists to do that. We are spending huge amounts of energy reinventing the wheel each time a therapist enters a bit of a management role in a practice or a department. And it steals our creativity and it steals our energy away from treating patients. And then lastly, I feel very strongly about enhancing our role in the multidisciplinary team from grassroots level up. Young doctors, young physiotherapists need to realize what we offer to the multidisciplinary team, because if our services are valued and respected and acknowledged, we can progress faster in our own careers. But this is a two-sided relationship. We need to value and respect the roles of fellow multidisciplinary team members as well. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you to this presentation, and I think for all the young therapists, just wait for the 2-year itch and then you can grow again. Also very nice recommendations from that. Okay, next is Kirsty. So she's going to talk about hand health for all. Do undergraduate occupational therapy curricula respond to the call? So here's your answer, Tuli, on your earlier question.
Thank you, Dalian. I don't know if I'll answer it, but maybe give some points for discussion. This is looking at hand therapy curriculum within the broader context of needing to train up therapists to deliver services to all. So it is a little bit outdated, but I think it's good grounds for discussion. We know that the undergraduate curriculum is the foundation for hand rehab practice, and we also know that curricula are under pressure to fit in everything they need to do. So the aim of this study was to look at what are we doing to describe the undergraduate rehab curriculum, and then to discuss it in light of our minimum standards, HBCSA and WIFIT minimum standards, policy and relevant literature. So it was just a cross-sectional survey design, administered online in 2013. I do cringe that it's so old, but then I also know with curricula, a lot changes and then lots doesn't change as well. So I think there are still a lot of relevant aspects to think about. I also realize in retrospect that a hand rehab curriculum is not an isolated thing within a curriculum. So assessing it as an isolated thing is not that easy. But all 8 universities responded. In terms of the hours spent on the curriculum, it ranged the median was 30 hours, with a huge range between 12 and 96 hours. I think UP must have been 96 hours. And the practical splinting hours, a median of 22 hours on splinting. And then they said that 70% of students had practice learning placements where they treated patients with hand conditions. I'm assuming that that's stroke-related upper limb conditions, because I know, in my experience, perhaps 3 students in a year will have exposure to hand rehab. Then, in terms of assessments taught, you will also see my survey design left a little bit to be desired, but basically the assessments that were reported most frequently were your performance component assessments taught by all, and hand function, and just to highlight, patient-rated assessments at that stage were only taught by 2 of the universities. Splints fabricated, an average of 7. Some university students would fabricate up to 11, some only 3. So if we're thinking about, acquiring a skill, that is quite a range. In terms of conditions covered, the grey area denotes the conditions that were covered, with the columns being the 8 universities. And it shows that actually a fair number of conditions were covered. And similarly for modalities. What I take from those 2 pictures is that we do squash a lot into a little bit of time. And this was part of a bigger study where we're looking at ComServe's perceived competence and confidence for practice. So we looked at the students' reported competence and confidence, and then the university they were from. And we tried to, we did a factor analysis to see what factors were related to students feeling more confident and competent. And first of all, I need to say that you couldn't explain the sense of confidence or competence just because something was covered in the curriculum. There was no statistical link there. But when we looked at graduate competence, the 2 things that stood out were enjoying treating patients with upper limb pathology and having an upper limb practice learning placement. Then when we looked at confidence, having adequate practical skills, also enjoying it, and also having a practice learning placement where those were correlated. And yes, this is self-reported competence and confidence, but it is noteworthy. So then, just reflecting on what one of my participants reported earlier, she said, after a year, it's what you make of it. And undergraduate curriculum is important, but after a year, it's what you make of it. Reflecting on that, and looking at the time that we have available in the curriculum and looking at the literature and minimum standards, I'd like to propose core competencies or characteristics that we need to foster in our graduates. So the ability to assess accurately, which I think we have covered, and as a starting point for treatment, being able to apply our basic sciences, so our anatomy, and creating those links, the distance between second year and a hand curriculum is miles, so opportunities for that, and hand therapy principles as well. Then the competent use of appropriate modalities, an occupation-based approach, and then I think that I hope everyone agrees the emphasis is really around building sound clinical reasoning. Then also developing those professional attitudes that enable collaborative relationship competence. The resourcefulness. So I changed a little bit of what I do in my teaching to incorporate low resource settings in their reasoning, so that they don't just get alarmed. You want to expose them to all the thermoplastics, but so that students aren't alarmed when they get to practice and they don't have what they had at varsity. And then also to foster lifelong learners, and I think perhaps Coriana touched on that. Those fostering those dispositions that are going to make our graduates strive to grow as they continue in their career. And then the most important thing, to foster fun. And basically I've added this in my student evaluations, I've added this as an outcome. Because if that's related to confidence and competence, then somehow I need to foster that in my teaching. And I think that is possible, to make learning enticing, to foster integration, to make it active. So really, I think my recommendations, to build strategic undergraduate foundations. We are never going to be able to cover everything. Clinical reasoning being a core. And then one of the things that I'm dreaming about at the moment is thinking about innovative fieldwork options for hands. In Cape Town, they would have, for children with sensory integrative difficulties, they would have what they called Kwela Camp, where those children would spend weeks and students would go and learn at Kwela Camp. And is there a possibility of having a hand camp where we combine the skills of private and public therapists and elective placements for students, and then patients who need block therapy, that we can, and perhaps doing that in venues that are close to patients' homes. So just exploring innovative options to enabling those opportunities for them to integrate what they're learning in theory, and then make it fun at all costs. Thank you.
Right, so our next, I thank you, Kirsty, that is all very nice. The next presentation is on the continuous professional development opportunities for rural occupational therapists, insights for generalists delivering the hand injury care. So these presenters are stuck in traffic, but apparently we're going to have a plan here. So we continue? All right. Okay, I'm not sure what's going to happen now, but let's see.
Hi, sorry, I'm not sure if anyone can hear me. Okay, I think we are up and running. I'm so sorry about that. Lindsay and I have had quite an adventure trying to get to this conference, and unfortunately we just haven't been able to make it. So this is our next best option. So my name is Caitlin. I'm presenting here with Lindsay Williams, and
I think we
are presenting the CPD opportunities for rural OTs, insights for generalists delivering hand injury care. This was contributed to by Randy Yarker, Timima Meyer, and Sarah Ziskin, and supervised and contributed to greatly by Denise Franzen and Kirsty van Stormbrook. Next slide, please. So, for the introduction.
Just a little bit surrounding our project. So we found that 43% of South Africans' population lived in rural areas, which is a large portion. There are very few therapists that are employed to service these populations, with the majority being either newly graduated, so either in ComServe and inexperienced. These therapists are expected to provide very generalist services, including hand therapy for a wide variety of conditions. Undergraduate programs also do not necessarily adequately prepare their graduates to serve these settings or provide these services, therefore relying on postgraduate and continued learning. So in here comes your CPD, and thus through CPD, we hope to improve our skills continuously throughout our profession. The undergraduate study was conducted in 2020, and it sought to describe the CPD needs of rural OTs in the South African public health sector.
Okay, next slide, please. Right, so with the methodology, our research design was a quantitative descriptive cross-sectional study. For sampling, our population was OTs working in or with experience in the rural public health sector, and our sample was calculated at 120 individuals. We sat at 92 accessed and 45 completed surveys. Our instrument was an electronic self-administered survey. Next slide, please. So for piloting, we distributed the survey to 16 OTs with expert knowledge in rural practice through RAP and RESA, as well as university contacts, and 4 of those were completed. For the data collection procedure, ethical clearance was obtained in Jan of 2020, and the survey was distributed by OTASA, RAP, the National OT Forum, and RESA, amongst a few others, and data collection began on the 30th of April in 2020. Next slide, please. So data analysis, we used closed-ended questions analyzed by descriptive statistics and open-ended questions analyzed by content analysis. Ethical considerations, all participants were made aware of the benefits, risks, and disadvantages of participating. We did gain informed consent, and there was an information sheet included. With regards to limitations, COVID-19 played a huge role. Obviously, it impacted our data collection quite a lot. We had a low response rate as a result, and there was poor implementation of recommendations obtained during piloting, unfortunately. Next slide, please.
Okay, so in terms of results, the number of participants, we only had 48 OTs that participated, indicating very low response rate of OTs that either worked or were presently working in rural. In terms of the demographics and practice statistics, our median age was 27, indicating very limited experience. Experience in rural was 2.5 years, and 9 people had postgraduate qualifications. Next slide, please. Okay, then in terms of the province and level of care in which the rural therapists worked, so the top 3 were either Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, and KZN. And then the level of healthcare that these people worked in, majority were at district hospitals, indicating limited resources. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. There we go, sorry. Okay, and then in terms of the predominant language spoken within each of these regions, Zulu came out at the top with 25%, and when the therapists were asked if they were able to communicate effectively in the language, 70% to them said that they were unable to communicate. Next slide, please. Then following on from that, with specifics to hand rehab, the most common condition that was noted was upper limb injuries, indicating the need for expertise within this.
Next slide, please. So for the modes of CPD delivery, this is just a graph showing the modes that were readily available to the participants as well as their ideal or preferred mode. So we can see that online courses were the most readily available for them, but their overall most ideal was actually skills workshops, which does indicate a need for more practical learning opportunities. Next slide, please. Okay, so this shows whether or not the online CPD that participants had access to was realistic. And so our overall answers were 35% no and 65% yes. So just from convenience, accessibility and cost effectiveness, we had a participant who had said, online CPD activities have allowed me to gain more access to CPD knowledge as I was a minimum of a 3-hour drive to get to any city. So that obviously indicates that that online is more cost effective, accessible and convenient for them. However, it doesn't necessarily deliver the practical skills needed. Next slide, please.
Okay, just following on from that, challenges in accessing CPD. So with regards to challenges in accessing CPD, the top 3 were either distance, cost, and time travel. So distance, these therapists were placed very far away from major provinces where CPD
Lindsay and Caitlin, we've lost you. So thank you to Lindsay and Caitlin. They are having network problems, so they've been dropped off the Zoom call. So we'll go on to the next one, Communities of Practice, a versatile vehicle for learning. So this really, this was the community service OT community of practice that I talked about a little bit earlier. Apart from the research question we were looking at, I wanted to understand, well, it seemed that that participating in the community of practice was actually very helpful. So I wanted to understand the experience of it. So if you were anything like me and didn't know what a community of practice was, it's really a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. And as I said, we met over a 7-month period, every 2 weeks for 90 minutes on Teams, and we had a WhatsApp chat group that interacted sometimes daily. The purpose was to collect data, but but as it turned out, it actually provided more. So I did an online survey, asking them a few questions on their experience of the group, and the results analyzed thematically generated three themes: a versatile support, a vehicle for learning, and grounding professionally and contextually. So for support, they felt helped and supported. It was a safe place to admit their weaknesses. Everyone was so supportive and willing to listen, willing to share their experiences, which makes sharing yours easier. And one of our ComServes here today said, it's just so wonderful to hear everyone else is also struggling. So there's power in that. It was good for the soul, makes you feel less frustrated and alone in the struggles, being able to ask people for help and knowing somehow we'll figure this out when you have a patient in front of you. It was also the opportunity for resources to learn many tricks. And one of the aspects that stood out was the immediacy. Having the WhatsApp group a phone away is amazing for your stress levels, knowing you can ask for help and there's always a response. Then it was a vehicle for learning. First of all, because it provided opportunity for mutual learning. It allows you to share your experience and learn from others. It provided opportunities to learn, to develop knowledge and skill. As a generalist OT, there are many conditions you have to focus on. So this is a one-stop group to give you the knowledge so you don't have to go and look up all the information by yourself, information you wouldn't necessarily have found in articles. It was also an opportunity, a place to reflect and grow as an OT practitioner in terms of hands. And it facilitated clinical reasoning. It's important to find people who can provide you with accurate clinical reasoning or support for developing accurate clinical reasoning when you're unsure of where to go. And it was an opportunity to be able to access to people who could actually help me and teach me. So the aspect of expertise within the group. And then this one was a little bit unexpected for me. It was both professionally and contextually grounding. It was an opportunity to consolidate their occupational identity, their professional identity. It was striking how it changed the way I look at hand therapy and the role of OT. It made me realize our role better and have an interest in it, more than coming in. It made me want to be an OT, which is really important realization for a community service OT. And then also, it also affirmed or consolidated occupational therapy values to always think back to patient goals and to remember that the hand belongs to a person and treat the person holistically. It was also responsive and relevant to their practice realities, to have people that could come and address topics they were struggling with. It's not just another lecture, someone said, it's specific, and to learn how to integrate hand therapy into the community setting. So I asked, would you recommend a COP? Definitely. You really come in knowing nothing. I felt guilty about how little I knew and how bad my therapy was. So being in a group with other people who are in the same boat as me was so helpful. But then also being given access to people who could actually help me and teaching me how to clinically reason through cases felt like winning the lottery in terms of hand therapy. It was such an amazing experience. In writing the handover for the new ComServes coming to our hospital, I've been recommending all the courses that I went on this year that I found helpful. And it's a little bit sad that I can't recommend this one because it definitely was the most helpful and provided the most support. Another participant said, yes, but it needs to be on an accessible platform. Teams didn't work for us. Zoom would be better, and WhatsApp. They suggested, yes, meet every 1 to 2 weeks for 60 to 90 minutes, and recommended that the group consist of 5 to 10 members. So, is it a versatile vehicle for learning? I would argue yes, because it's possible to overcome rural and remote locations. It allows for extended learning partnerships. It can, not necessarily, but if done well, can facilitate equitable, reciprocal learning relationships. It's efficient. Now, I wonder, because it's supporting the learning of 5 to 10 people all at the same time compared to a one-on-one kind of relationship. So I would argue that it's versatile. And one of them said, it's about the only way to do it. Bless them. And then a versatile vehicle for learning. Does it facilitate learning? Well, yes. The support need that goes with their learning need is so strong, which it met. It provided that need for community. It provided learning in context. And we know that learning in a social context is really what learning is about, and it provided this opportunity to think together. So one of the authors within Community of Practice Literature says the negotiation of meaning at the core of human learning, or the negotiation of meaning is at the core of human learning, as opposed to merely the acquisition of information and skills. And for human beings, a central drive for the negotiation of meaning is the process of becoming a certain person in a social context. And I think the Community of Practice provided this. So yes, I would argue that it is a vehicle, a versatile vehicle for learning. But I also would suggest that there's potential. We've talked about partnerships between public and private, international partnerships, and I would argue across the multidisciplinary team that it's an opportunity to build strategic and sustainable services where one can bring in expertise, one can bring in professional wisdom for those that have worked within the public health service for many years, who are more familiar with policies and management, who can assist these therapists that we're sending out to build more sustainable services. And then I'd like to suggest that it's also an incubator for innovation, because that little kit came out of our little 6 months of Community of Practice. So my recommendations would be potentially upscaling communities of practice as an intervention that can be multidisciplinary or within OT, and then also organically formed communities of practice. It doesn't necessarily have to be a professionally organized thing, but it's just a mode that ended up being really, really useful. So thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. She speaks fast. I hope you listened fast as well. Yeah, and I think if we look back of our focal question this morning that we said, what is going to make quality hand therapy effective in the public hospitals? I think, again, there's a lot of things that Kirsty already gave us there. So tomorrow we're going to test it and see, look at the priorities. Okay, shall we go on to the next? Okay. Do they know that?
So they're not able to rejoin the Zoom. They have asked if I could quickly run through the rest of the slides of the previous presentation just to get to the recommendation section, please. Thank you. And thank you, Lindsay and Caitlin, for starting us off. So basically, challenges were really around distance, cost, and travel time. And then the relevance of CPD content to rural practice. It was half and half, or 44% said no, 54% said yes. And some therapists said, we plan our own topics and sessions that are presented by local staff, so it's nearly always relevant. And others said, we were proactive in identifying our needs and finding people to meet them. And I think a strong focus of the therapists who said it was relevant seemed to be, you can't wait around for a relevant course. You need to take what you can from it, apply what you can, identify your own learning needs, and make it happen. So really being agentic about identifying and meeting your own learning needs. Then we asked, is their CPD supported by their health setting? And 58% said no, it wasn't. 5 said no, there was no support from management, there was no financial support, or they weren't granted leave. Whereas those who did get leave said it's written up as part of my contract. And another one said the setting believes in affording the opportunity for skills development and sometimes offers to pay for it. Our hospital has a skills development program funded by a medical insurer, which used to pay for selected courses that will benefit the hospital. So also looking there at partnerships and very interesting, looking at external funding for CPD. And then here, one of the therapists said, it's basically up to you to do on your own, CPD in your own time. So really in settings where they didn't have any support at all for their continuous professional development. So then looking at our conclusions. OT serving in rural communities are typically newly graduated with limited experience. This is not the case for everyone, but there's a large group of these therapists, emphasizing the need for CPD learning opportunities. The language barrier between therapists and their patients, we believe there's a potential for app-based language learning in addition to skills development. So there's a lot of development in sort of interactive ways of learning basic proficiencies in other languages, so we think that should be considered. And the results indicated that hand conditions are seen frequently within rural areas, suggesting the need for specific hand-based therapy learning opportunities. In terms of the modes of activities, online was beneficial, but there were also limitations to this, and definitely a need to create opportunities for practical workshops. And there were some suggestions around using video case studies and needing to put together video case studies to harness the online platform for more practical, more interactive online opportunities. Then it needs to be focused on rural therapists, so to support rural therapists' agency in identifying their own CPD needs and allowing for their self-directed learning, and then providing evidence for providers of CPD activities to refine the current learning opportunities to meet the needs of these therapists. And then there's a need for management to be required to provide the support and encourage learning opportunities. So I think the take-homes are to ensure courses are aimed at relieving barriers related to time, travel, and cost. Online courses should accommodate for these barriers without sacrificing on the quality of the course. We would like to suggest one rural hands course per year, or reduced fees for rural remote therapists who are required to travel, perhaps even considering accommodation buddy systems where urban therapists are willing to accommodate a rural therapist. Rural health representatives should be part of course planning, and perhaps even just attending the one annual meeting of the South African Society of Hand Therapists each year to give input, and to ensure courses cater for low resource contexts, as well as injuries that have been complicated by poor service and referral pathways. So thank you to this group, to Denise Franson. Thank you for listening.
That was also valuable information towards the end of that presentation, so thank you for finishing that, Kirsty. The next one is again online, reviewing training methods for generalist occupational therapists in basic therapy, and that is Marty Simpsons, also from KwaZulu-Natal.
Reviewing training methods for generalized occupational therapists in basic hand therapy. Occupational therapists in South Africa often find themselves at the starting blocks of their careers being confronted and overwhelmed by treating high volumes of patients presenting with hand injuries. These therapists are usually left to treat these patients with minimal supervision and training, which poses a major ethical dilemma to the communities that they service. I feel the issue at hand is that junior therapists are not given the optimum chance to develop. They are exposed to bulk experience, making them desperate to integrate knowledge that they don't have. Introduction to Hand Therapy is a course that was developed by myself as a response to the cry of help from junior colleagues. The focus of this course is on giving participants access to bulk information in a short period of time at the start of their careers in hand therapy. The hope is that with their existing exposure to hand injuries, they could show faster integration of knowledge into practice, cultivating a passion for the science and art of hand therapy at an early stage in their career, as well as helping them serve the communities. The course focuses on improving knowledge applicable to hand therapy and enhancing clinical reasoning. The theory course can be followed up with a 2-day practical course, which will not be discussed during this presentation. The theory course has been presented in person from 2016 to 2020 with approximately 100 participants attending during this time. The in-person course is a 5-day course, 8 hours a day. Since 2020, after COVID, I moved the theory course to an online platform, and since 2020, over 283 participants attended the course. The course takes on average 2 months to complete. There's 20 modules, but I've had participants taking anywhere from 1 week to complete the course to 1.5 years. So it is quite flexible. The aim of this presentation today is to detect whether participants felt that the theory course is presented more effectively on an online platform or in person. The questionnaire that was sent out was designed to detect participants' subjective opinions on variables that promoted integration of theory into practice. If we look at the method, I've emailed 226 occupational therapists. From these emails, I received 34 responses that completed an anonymous questionnaire. 30 of these participants participated in the online platform, and only 4 of these participants, which is important to note, completed the course in person. With the questionnaire, I tried to detect who was the population seeking further education. What are the incentives that drives therapists to seek education? The course is very heavy in content and can potentially overwhelm participants. I tried to detect with the questionnaire whether the course was too overwhelming and that it actually inhibited further learning. The questionnaire was also designed to see whether therapists still working in the field of hand therapy, if they benefited from participating in the course. The questionnaire also gave participants the opportunity to give feedback on variables they feel would enhance their learning. Let's look at the results. Years of experience on average when signing up for this course range from less than a year up to 8 years. Only 3 participants had more than 6 years of experience, and the majority of participants has less than a year experience and less than 6 months experience when signing up. When asked if participants felt that their undergraduate training prepared them for hand therapy, 24 participants of the 34 answered no, and only 3 answered yes. 22 participants were working in the field of hand therapy when they signed up for the course. I asked the participants why they signed up for the course in the first place. 33 of the 34 said it was for a search for knowledge. 8 of them were preparing for job interviews. 3 were generalist occupational therapists needing guidance on protocols, and only 2 signed up for the need of CPD points. When the participants were asked what their subjective opinion were, whether the course would be best presented online or in person, 18 participants felt that the course would be better presented in person. 2 of the individuals who attended the course in person actually stated that the course would be better presented online. 14 of the participants felt that the course would be better presented online. From this point on, I asked participants to identify the advantages and the disadvantages from each of these platforms. If we look at the in-person course, participants felt that practical aspects were difficult to convey through the online recordings, and in-person exposure would be better for demos. In-person sessions facilitated more interaction and clarification amongst the group. They felt that being present for a whole week helped them focus their minds on the act of learning on hand therapy. They mentioned that it helped to expose therapists to a bulk of information in shorter periods of time, making it easier for them to help a broader spectrum of patients. This is also just a preferred learning style of participants to be present while learning. And then this was also a powerful start of mentoring relationships and getting to know other therapists with similar struggles in the field. The disadvantages was that the 5-day course, in-person course, was very overwhelming, theory-wise, to go through the amount of content. the disadvantage of the in-person course is that it's not as accessible for everyone due to leave restraints, financial restraints, and people just staying too far to attend. Some of the community service therapists also felt that their undergraduate training didn't prepare them for hand therapy and community service, and they had a very small frame of reference to apply the information they were getting from the course, so they were easily saturated with the information. Let's look at the online form. Advantages of this platform was that the course is theory-rich, and the online modules allow time to process the different sections and avoid information overload. The videos had the advantage that it can be paused to take time to absorb information presented in them, and then you have the added advantage of being able to go back to the videos, watch them again, especially if you encounter a specific condition, so allowing you to repetitively integrate the information that you had access to. There's a big convenience factor with the online platform. You don't have to take leave. You can complete the course at any point in time, day, night. You can do it in bulk. You can spread it over several months. It's affordable, and people said they enjoyed this because it was flexible and it accommodated their lifestyles. They felt that the integration of knowledge was fantastic because you can take in a little bit of information and then go to work and integrate it into practice. There was access to mentorship, but you had to actively seek that, and the presenter could be contacted at any point in time. The disadvantages of this platform is that there's less interaction that facilitates discussion on the different topics. Not being present for demonstration is a big downfall of the online platform, and it really lacks meaningful interaction and community amongst therapists. Look at the subjective experiences of participants. Participants that felt that their passion for hand therapy increased by participating, 24 of the 34 said this. An increased passion for ongoing learning, 21. Facilitated increased clinical reasoning, 27. The course was too overwhelming for 9 of the participants. Is this associated with the platform that was being used? It was noted that online attendance, 6 out of the 30 participants felt overwhelmed, where 3 out of the 4 participants that attended the course in person felt overwhelmed. Did the participants with less experience in the field of hand therapy felt more overwhelmed by the course? So 6 of the overwhelmed participants were working in the field of hand therapy, and all 6 of these therapists had less than 6 months experience in the field. And half of them were working with minimal supervision. 3 of the 9 participants that felt overwhelmed was not working in the field of hand therapy while participating in the course. Of these 9 participants, 6 of the participants that felt overwhelmed are no longer working in the field of hand therapy. It is interesting to note that from the 9 participants who felt overwhelmed, 2 felt that there was no integration of knowledge into practice. 6 of these participants felt that the course still improved their clinical reasoning. 7 of the 9 felt that the course fostered a passion for hand therapy, and 7 felt that it fostered a passion for ongoing learning. So not all was wasted. 16 of the 34 therapists that attended the course are still working in the field of hand therapy. Participants were asked whether the information they received on the course was integrated into practice using a Likert scale, where 1 was info did not translate into practice, and 5, all the information was integrated. So if we look at the population still in the field of hand therapy, you can see that they have a higher tendency in integrating information compared to the participants who's not participating, who's not working in the field of hand therapy anymore, even if it's in the slightest. I want to just let you take note of the case that identified with no information translating into practice, case number 5, which is one of our discussions points later in the presentation. When asked, was most of the information forgotten by the end of the course? On a Likert scale, 1, everything was forgotten, and 5, everything was remembered. It is interesting to see that most of the participants related to a number 3 and a number 4. There's a number case 5, which would be part of our discussion, that felt that no information was retained by the end of the course. If we look at the participants' perception of their own level of clinical reasoning before attending the course and after attending the course, with using a Likert scale, where 1 is no clinical reasoning and 5 profound clinical reasoning, it gives me great joy to see that most of the participants identify with level 4 of clinical reasoning after attending the course, where most of them comes from a level 2 or 3. I do want to highlight just case 5 that had no clinical reasoning integration, as well as case 4 that remained on a level 2 of clinical reasoning after attending the course. When asking participants who are still working in the field of hand therapy whether they still make use of their notes, I find it interesting that we've got therapists making use of their course notes still on a monthly, weekly, and daily basis. What I enjoy as a trainer with this is that I know that on a regular basis they are still exposed to the theory and making sure they're integrating it into day-to-day practice. Participants were asked how confident they were in treating hand therapy patients making use of a Likert scale, with 1 no confidence and 5 complete confidence. You will see that there's a drastic climb in the confidence of treating hand therapy patients with the population after attending the course. When asked their opinions on the bulk of information they receive on the course, it is a very difficult question to answer. Less versus more. What is the advantages and disadvantages from including more information in the course? It was noted that as community service therapists, they find it difficult to integrate the amount of knowledge if they've got limited amount of experience to integrate the knowledge into. There's suggestions to try and have it in more separate, to have separate topics covered over a longer period of time. It's also been noted the need for having bulk information and not taking 2 to 3 years before you've gone through all the information to be able to treat all the patients that cross your path. When participants were asked what they felt could be done to assist junior therapists and to develop as hand therapists, there was a great emphasis on practical exposure. A request for having more work placements willing to hire therapists with little experience in hand therapy and offer mentorships while working. To have more exposure on practical components in undergraduate level. The course information cannot be integrated if it does not get put into practice. Hand therapy is about exposure. Participants also highlighted that undergraduate training and exposure was inadequate. Undergraduates are not made aware about the bulk of hand therapy patients that will be treated on a community level, on a community service level basis. You go into the situation unprepared. More in-depth lectures and practicals at a campus level is needed, with refresher courses during the community service year. Undergraduate training needs to be done by therapists working in the field of hand therapy. Mentorship was identified as a big need. In-person training naturally assists in setting up mentorship relationship, where online platforms is less spontaneous for this relationship to develop. There's a need for support groups that are easily accessible, groups where therapists can discuss cases and get feedback from experienced hand therapists. There's a need for structured mentorship programs after completing these theory courses and practical courses. There's also a need for a variety of courses, differing in both length, duration, levels of difficulty,
Okay, sorry, we asked to stop this presentation due to the time constraints that we have. So there's also nice information, but unfortunately we had to stop this. So the last presentation will be from Kirsty on policy-based principles for hand rehabilitation services in South Africa. So it's the very last one. You can do this.
Thank you for the opportunity to just talk briefly about policy. We've talked about responding to patients' experiences, service providers' experiences, educators, experts, and now just a short input on being responsive to policy. So hand therapy has, if we think of it as a developmental curve, in South Africa, hand therapy has been influenced by many things, and many things have facilitated its growth. And I want to propose that policy is something that also shapes the way hand therapy grows and determines the direction towards which hand therapy grows. So this study aimed to develop policy-based principles for hand rehabilitation services, and to do this by defining a model of care for hand rehabilitation in which we identify role players and roles and delineate the role of the generalist and specialist. I'm just going to really address the top objective here. So what policies did I include? Basically local and international policies that relate to disability or rehabilitation, services delivered by OTs, or education and the ongoing education of OTs, as well as South African healthcare policy. And I developed this list based on literature and consultation with stakeholders in the protocol development stage of this project. Then that list of policies was reviewed by a panel of experts, and we settled on a list of 29 policies for my sins. And I used a qualitative descriptive design in which I did content analysis, and I used framework analysis described by Ritchie and Spencer, which has 5 stages. I read through all the policies to familiarize myself with them, and then I needed to put together a lens through, there are 1,000 things you can go looking for in a policy. What lens do I want to look at this policy through? So the main focus was looking at the models of care literature and developing a matrix through which to look at these policies, and I used a program on NVivo to do that. And really, a model of care, one of our colleagues from Australia talked a little bit about that earlier, but really speaks to the way healthcare is delivered. It's the who, the where, the why, the what of a service. And so really, if I had to explain it, if you imagine or how I did the analysis, if you imagine a massive table with all the policies, the 29 policies down the rows, and then at the top, I think we had about 50 codes of different characteristics that I was searching. So for each policy, I would look for each. So, And then, so that was the initial process, and when I found in the policy, if I found something that related to accessibility of care, I would read that part of the policy, summarize it, and then link it to that part of the policy. Yeah, if you'd like to know how it works. And then basically I had this massive table with all these summaries, and then I started looking at the summaries to look at patterns and trends, and to map what are all these policies saying to us about hand rehabilitation. Actually I'll tell you that in a moment. So these are the 29 policies. The green areas are local policies, the blue are international policies. So first of all, these ones were our rehabilitation related policies. Then the orange ones, which will probably come up now because I don't want to press this too much, are the ones related to rehabilitation. So red related to disability, orange rehabilitation, and I'm struggling to change slides. The green ones are OT policies, international ones. I drew on a lot of the World Federation of OTs position statements, as well as the minimum standards. and then also used the minimum standards from the Health Professions Council. The policies in black were mostly our national health policies, and then I had one hand-specific policy, the 2004 Compensation Commissioner's Guidelines for Health Practitioners and Employers to Manage Work-Related Upper Limb Disorders. So, basically, I put the pot and boiled it to reduce it. That large pot was in a little corner under the stairs in my house, where I sat in front of a computer screen for a long time. But basically, these are the principles. There were 18 principles that essentially come out of these policies. And it was wonderful, actually, to see that I don't need to talk too much about them because they have been reiterated in what we've talked about today. So perhaps we can just reflect on where are we in hand rehabilitation in these areas. So the why are we doing this thing? It's all about enabling full participation and inclusion in society for all. And we've heard today that we are needing, as a profession, to continually recalibrate, almost like, you know, getting your wheel alignment checked, continually recalibrating towards focusing on functioning, participation, and inclusion in society. And then also, we're pursuing equitable services and equality in service delivery, and that's something that we've talked about intensifying to extend care in public, remote, and rural areas. Then the what. So what kind of services do we need to deliver? They need to be accessible, and that includes being accessible, acceptable, affordable. Going back to acceptable, a word that comes from the Australian model of care research is, now it's escaped my, it'll come, and I've just forgotten it. Anyway, but accessible, acceptable, affordable, and adequate, and as close to the people as possible. That's if we think of our developmental trajectory, that's where we want to be going. We want to deliver quality, client-centered care. And the World Federation of OTs has developed a really useful tool to help us evaluate the quality of our services, which is freely available online. Then we've talked about our occupational focus, and really that, in all these documents, and it's talking about a multidisciplinary team, but what we're working towards is OT's bread and butter. It is what we do, and we need to stand really strong in that contribution as a profession. Then work interventions, the need for a strong focus on work interventions was raised. And then care that needs to be truly comprehensive. So when I say that, we need to think about prevention, promotion, rehab, and cure. And just one example, I think we're behind in terms of thinking about preventing hand injuries. This is a screenshot from the American Society of Hand Therapists website on safety and injury prevention tips. They are quite contextual. It's pumpkin cutting safety for Halloween. So a little different, but there's great work around the world on hand injury prevention, and it's not for all of us to be involved in, but an area that seriously does need our attention. And then so that was the what, then the how. How are we going to do that? We need to be responsive and anticipatory. So basically, in South Africa, our morbidity stats are going down. Our mortality stats are mortality stats are improving, but that means our mobility stats are increasing, and our need for rehabilitation is increasing. So by all projections, our need for rehabilitation in general and hand rehabilitation is increasing, and we need to prepare ourselves for that and not be on the back foot as we consider that. And then we need key health system inputs, and by that we mean financing, leadership and governance, resources, including assistive devices, infrastructure, and technology. And then another strong theme in the literature, and it was so wonderful to hear Nicole's presentation on a monitoring and evaluation strategy, is really about data for service improvement. And a very helpful resource, which I've asked Khafida just to put in the Zoom chat, is the ICHOM set of patient-centered outcome measures for wrist and hand conditions that was updated last year. which it's freely available online and gives an outline of what assessments we need to use for what aspects of care, and those are patient-centered outcome measures. And then, I see I started upside down, but that's okay. And then networks and partnerships. I think that's that I actually didn't go in looking for information on networks and partnerships, but it's something that emerged. It was an inductive code that came out of the analysis. There's a need for us to be looking at international partnerships, multidisciplinary partnerships, public-private partnerships, and an invitation to really combine our strengths. We need a seamless system, and that's really speaking about multidisciplinary, integrated, seamless care. One of those aspects is referrals, which we've talked about, but I think there's a lot more room for discussion around interdisciplinary care. And then an incredibly strong theme in these policies and in all our in global and national health development and global development plans is around the social determinants of health and intersectoral action for vital communities, with communities being the bedrock and the foundation of a healthy society. And as hand therapists who treat a hand, I think there's room for us to venture out and start thinking about the employment of our patients. We're too gifted in creativity and innovation. Not that we have to give up the treating of the hand, but there's so much work to be done in other sectors as well. And then we need a vital workforce, which is actually the question that we've been looking at today. And lastly, I want to go to the full principle that I'd extracted for empowered service users. Rehabilitation, policy says that rehabilitation should affirm the autonomy, dignity, freedom of choice, abilities, expression of views and goals, and rights to self-determination of clients, their families and carers, communities and populations, by ensuring rehab is voluntary, collaborative, and where decision-making is shared and supported and facilitated by effective communication. Clients and communities are responsible for and supported in taking action on matters affecting their health, including the care of assistive devices, and are included in service development and research. And then finally, the when, the who, the when, and the where. There's a role for the specialist and the generalist. There's a role across the acute, subacute, and chronic phases of care. And we are needed across the service platform, from a community level right to our specialist units. So I think perhaps, and with not going into too much detail, what this policy has bookended many of our discussions, or reiterated many of our discussions today. So as we think about a dream of enabling handheld services to be available to all, I think our discussions today have really helped us on our way, and we look forward to deliberating tomorrow to think of practical strategies of implementing the evidence we've heard today. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kirsty. So that was impressive. I mean, just think of that analysis. So now we have time for questions. Any questions on this last session? Questions to specific presentations or comments? I know you want to go home. Yes, Helen. Yes, of course. Oh, you can just put. Yeah. Green one.
Ah, I was going to the wrong one. Okay. First of all, I was saying well done, Kirsty. And you know, when you're discussing all the methodologies, you're kind of wondering how will it turn out. And I think it's been a wonderful day. Lots of rich information, more analysis. But I think there are some key words that, and they may still come out in the stickies, but that were insinuated and but didn't come out. One of them is advocacy, and I think and I think that the pointing towards the lack of work in the prevention space is probably the reason why that word was missing. So that's something that if you might want to add on the stickies. And then the second one, which I think wasn't adequately underscored, is the IPE, the interprofessional education and the interprofessional practice. So, those are two things that maybe, Kirsty, you need to just keep in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Helen. Any other comments? Audrey?
Thank you, Kirsty. It was a very great day. I think just to add on something, it's been mentioned, but just how this community of practice and mentorship also leads to accountability, both for the mentor and the mentee, because now you don't know what you don't know, and that's a good place to start, but now you've gone and figured it out, and to keep each other accountable for what goes on after that is a great place to be and a great place to carry on learning from. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes.
Thank you so much. Okay, then please just allow me to quickly do the thanks. So Kirsty wants to thank all the presenters. Thanks so much for the time that you put in to put together your presentation and come and share here, even come here face to face. So thank you so much for this. And then also for these who just attended, all these attendees, if you wasn't a presenter but you're still here, so thank you for that. Then also a special thanks to the stakeholder panel, because you're not done with this. We will see you tomorrow. So thank you so much for all your input, your wisdom, and your knowledge. And then also she wants to say lots of thanks to her supervisors that spend the whole day to come here and to support her in this dream, this consensus conference. So it was also great to have you here. So she says thank you so much for that. The conference administrator, Kafida, so thank you so much for all your organization. Like, you know what you're doing, seriously, so thank you so much. And also for the conference chair, which was Leon, so thank you so much for her. And then Sash and WITS, also for their contributions to make this thing happen. And then the funders is the National Research Foundation, and then also CARSA, which is the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa, so that's also two generous funders. And then Elizabeth from the CSIR, who's kind of in the background, organizing everything, the tea and the lunches and whatever we need. And then also the cameramans and the technical people up there, so thank you so much. And I think, yeah. I thank everyone. And Kirsty, thank you so much. We were spoiled. It was a wonderful day, so thank you so much again. Okay, the CPD register, it was going around. So it's there with Lisa. So maybe just send it this way. Have you signed in front? Okay, so please just see that they get it. Is that everything now? Can the people go home? Can we release them? Open the gates? Okay, they can go.